I'm Lucas, and this is not the kind of story I figured I would have to share. I had spent 11 very ill years with my former wife, Egil. 11 years of commitment, sacrifice, and the kind of trust you only place in someone you know really is your person. We had met as young teenagers. I was 23, she was 21, and like any young couple, we were both ambitious. Back then, everything felt possible. I recalled her at a summer music festival on the Baltic coast. Her gentle, free laughter grabbed my attention straight away. Her hair was frizzy with the sea breeze, and her eyes glinted like she knew something we all didn't. I was hooked. We'd chatted all day, and didn't care about who was playing. Sunset, sky turned purple, and yet here we were, in the sand, discussing our future plans like we'd known each other forever. We soon became entangled. Then 2 years later, we bought a house together and married. We didn't get the big glitzy wedding, but it was perfect for us. It was only our families and friends, and the sound of the sea in our ears as we recited our vows. I still recall what she had been like that day. The dress was basic, but she was the cutest woman I had ever seen. I thought, this is it. That's who I will die with. For decades, we had been putting life together. I'd been in construction for hours, and Egil had a steady job as a project manager for a logistics company. We'd set some intentions, buy a house, go on vacation, see the world, but we had been putting off the big one, getting married. Next year, maybe. And I smiled. It was just right to be patient, you know? Get everything just right. But, as they say, if you wait until the perfect moment, you'll never get to it. Eventually we realized that. 10 years later, we were having a hard talk one night around the kitchen table. "Lucas, if we don't do this now, when will we?" said Egil. We weren't getting any younger, and I didn't want to be an elderly man running around a toddler. So we made a plan. We even named it Operation Baby, as if it were a secret mission. We laughed at it, but it was cool. Now we could look forward to something else. Egil announced she was pregnant a few months later. I still remember the moment. She was waiting for me to return home from work, and she seemed weird, all scrambled and anxious. She was never like that. I asked her if it was okay, and she simply gave me a little white stick with 2 pink lines on it. It took a second for me to get it, but when it finally clicked, my heart nearly spilled out of my chest. "You are serious?" I asked, eyes wide. She smiled, her face bursting into that huge wild laugh I'd adored. We hugged so tightly, I thought I would smother her. I could feel her laugh against my breast. I kissed the top of her head and said, "We did it, Egil. We finally did it." And that was the end of it. We felt like the world grew lighter. We began to buy clothes, names, and argue over every last detail. Crib sizes, stroller brands, you name it. It was a festival every day. Never before had I felt more excited about the future. And this, you see, is what they never tell you about happiness. You're blind. When life is good, you no longer see the tiny cracks in the floor. You ignore the insidious clues that something is amiss. You tell yourself it's all your fault. It's okay because it has to be okay. You're having a family after all. What's stronger than that? But people don't completely wreck your heart. They do it slowly in chunks. It started with her phone. I know, familiar tale, right? But it is true. She would leave her phone on silent more often. I'd look up at her on the couch, and she would text, looking at her screen as if she'd just heard the most outrageous joke in the world. I asked her to whom she was addressing, and she'd simply reply, "Oh, work stuff." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. For who, after all, has a suspicion of their mistress? But then she began to work late more often. She would call me around 7 o'clock, and she'd say, "I have to stay a bit longer to complete a project." I didn't doubt it again. Why would I? She was the one forming our child inside her. The woman I'd known for more than 10 years. "Don't be paranoid, Lucas," I said to myself. She is just busy. But gut instincts are not deceptive. They linger. They pull at your belly until you can no longer shake it. I came to surprise her at work one night. So I brought a dinner and thought it'd be nice to come by. That kind of husband of the year stuff. I had her dumplings from down the road, still hot in the bag. But when I reached her office, she didn't have a desk. No jacket. No bag. Her chair was pushed back like no one had been in there all day. "Hey, have you seen Egil?" "How?" I asked one of her colleagues. "Egil went away hours ago," he said, hardly noticing what was happening on his screen. "I think she took Mattis with her." I felt a chill creep through me. I knew who Mattis was. I'd met him at the company Christmas party last year. Head down, self-confident grin, never quiet enough. One of those men that puts you in his spotlight. I could see him peering at Egil more than once, but had ignored it. I thought she would never. We are solid. We're getting a baby, for heaven's sake. But now, sitting there with a cold bag of dumplings in my hand, something wasn't right. I called her cell phone. No answer. Sent a message. No reply. When she returned home, it was almost midnight. She had an explanation in her mind before I did. "Dude, work got delayed," she said, hiding her eyes as she removed her shoes. "Work, huh?" I said in a raised tone. "Yes, Lucas. What else would it be?" I looked at her for a second and felt that same kick in my stomach. I wanted to yell, to ask for an answer, but I didn't. Why? Because I was tired. Tired of doubting her. Had enough of being the detective in my marriage. "Just give it up, Lucas," I said to myself. "Make it something else that it is not." That was my mistake. And then, within a couple of weeks, it just kept getting worse. She got colder. Distant. She would glance over at me, but through me. I kept telling myself, it's the pregnancy. She is stressed. Her hormones are out of control. That was something I wanted to think. But deep down, I guessed. Then it happened. Then I woke up one morning, and she was gone. No note. No text. Just gone. I called her. No answer. Hours passed. Then, "I need some room, Lucas. Do not call me." That was it. No explanation. Just those 7 words. I was then convinced everything we had created, 11 years of love, marriage, and hope, was gone. And the worst part, she was carrying our baby. It was as if the ground had come undone. Everything I'd created, everything I'd put my faith in, all disappeared instantly. I still hoped that it was all just a nightmare the next morning. But it was not. The room was empty, and Egil's side of the bed was chilly. I answered my phone, expecting a call. Nothing. Just silence. My heart was beating like a drum. "She'll be back," I kept telling myself. "She just needs some space." But that day was the other one. Then 3. A week later, I learned she wouldn't be back. I didn't know where she was. None of her friends got in touch. Her family? They were just as quiet. It was as if everyone knew about some secret I wasn't supposed to know. My calls were sent to voicemail, and when she answered my texts, it was short and bitter. No warmth. "No, I miss you." Only professional questions about the baby and her health. Without her, the house was another place. Quieter, sure, but heavier too. I would go into the nursery we'd been building and stare at the empty walls. Bleached blue halfway, with small white clouds we had planned to work together. Her brush was still in the can. I still could make out the spot on the wall where she dropped a drip mark and said, "It makes it more interesting, right?" I used to believe her. Now, I didn't think so. For the next few weeks, I worked like a ghost. I was there, but not really there. Jurgis and Mantas, my colleagues at work, repeatedly asked if I was okay. "I'm good, I was tired," I told them. I felt unable to tell the truth publicly. I couldn't say, "My wife left me when she was 7 months pregnant." It sounded too pathetic, too unbelievable. Then one night, a call came in. The name of Egil appeared on the screen, and for a moment I possessed a deranged hope. Perhaps she's coming home, I imagined. But when I returned, her voice was stiff. "Lucas, I have to speak to you." "Finally," I said. "I've been phoning you for days, Egil. What is going on? Where are you?" "I am staying with a friend," she said, her voice brisk as though reading aloud. "Well, I just have to tell you. Well, I guess we'd better separate." "Separate?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "You mean divorce?" "Don't make this more difficult than it has to be," she advised. "I am doing what's right for me and for the baby." Something inside me snapped. "For the baby? What's the good for our baby if we leave our family?" She let out a grumble over the phone. "You would not understand, Lucas." "No, you are correct," I retorted. "I do not understand. How does the woman I have been in love with for 11 years get blown away like this? I don't understand. People evolve," she whispered in a low tone so hard it upset my gut. "I have changed. People change." That phrase stuck with me long after she hung up. It took an hour for me to just look at my phone, so firmly that my knuckles went white. 2 months later, at 3 a.m., I received a phone call. It was Egil's sister, Raza. "She is having a baby," she said quickly. "She is at the hospital." I sprang from bed, half awake, but crawling like a sled. I didn't even consider it. I took out my keys, slung on whatever was closest to me, and drove mad. I drove through stop signs, over speed limit. I didn't care. And all I could think was, I'm going to meet my daughter, and she will be seeing her face. I arrived at the hospital, and the receptionist asked me who I was. "Eglevenkina, iblertedet." "Toys only," she replied, barely blinking at me. "I am her husband," I replied. "Her baby belongs to me." I was looked at by the receptionist, that head-to-toe gaze as if to assess whether or not I was lying. She said something into her computer, then she turned her face. "Room 312, she said. "Take the elevator to the 3rd floor." I raced to the elevator, pressing the button as if it were going to speed up. At the 3rd floor, I finally saw Raza outside the room. She laughed sheepishly at me, then turned her head. Does she feel all right? I mumbled, helpless. She is okay, Raza said, without looking at me. The baby is fine too. A girl. I nodded, feeling a sigh of relief. My little girl was here. I was a father. You see her? I asked. Raza bit her lip. You probably need to wait a bit, she said. What for? I stepped forward, my heart beginning to pound again. Lukas, she started, looking guilty. Egil, she's not the only one there. Initially, I didn't quite make sense of her. Yet when I peered through the tiny window on the door, I saw it. Him. Mattis. He was next to Egil, holding her hand as she caressed our newborn daughter. The air left my lungs. I was punching myself in the gut. I stood still for a few seconds. I had no choice but to observe this man, this alien, standing where I should be standing. He was laughing with Egil, peering down at the baby as if she were his own. I turned away before they saw me. I wanted to go up and out of that door, yell at them both, demand to know what the hell was he doing. But I figured it wouldn't change anything. I would only look desperate. I rolled that anger down and settled into the plastic chair on the hallway floor. I poked my head into my hands, and my hands trembled. My daughter was in that room, a few feet away from me. And I was outside. It was a blur the weeks following Dana's birth. I was allowed to see her, but only by Egil. I would need to book it. She'd look at me like she was doing me a favor each time she let me hold my own daughter. And Mattis? He was always there. Always. And every time I visited Dana, he was there behind me, staring like he'd earned it. I initially considered taking it to court. I was a legal right as her father, I understood. But then I remembered Dana, how small and delicate she was. I didn't want her to be raised in a war between her parents. Be the big one, Lukas, I told myself. Don't push her into this. So I did nothing. I never petitioned for full custody. I didn't advocate for child support. I let it be. Now I wonder if I did something wrong. I see small echoes of myself in Dana every time I go there. The way she rolls her nose in frustration. The way she holds my finger with that firm, clinging force. She is my girl. She will always be my girl. That doesn't stop Egil from playing her little tricks. And she often skips my visits at the last minute. Other times she says Dana is too tired or not well. And every time I hear Mattis' voice behind me, my blood swells. I try to stay calm. For Dana's sake. I tell myself that I will not be the angry dad. I'll be the current father. The one she can trust. But occasionally the skepticism appears. Will she consider him her father? Will she call him dad someday? Even that alone makes me sleepless. The weeks turned into months, and I made a concerted effort to adapt as a part-time father. I hated saying it was that, but it was true. Dana came out to visit only when Egil had time to make it convenient for her. Initially, I thought to myself it was all right. No courts, no custody battles, no drama. But after a while, that peaceful deal felt more like a punishment than a truce. Egil dictated my time with my daughter. She chose when, where, and how long. If I wanted to take Dana to the park, I had to ask for it. If I wanted to take her to my apartment for a weekend, Egil said, "We'll see," which was a polite way of saying no. Meanwhile, Mattis had full access. He was always there, playing the good stepfather. I saw it on social media. Photo of him with Dana on his shoulders, holding her little hand and teaching her to walk for the first time. I saw photos of them as a family, at a pumpkin patch sometime in the fall. And those captions were the worst. Our little trip. Family day out. Family? I thought. You are not her family. I am. I tried to ignore it. My mind kept thinking, as long as she knows her real dad, that's enough. But every time I saw those photos, something more of me was disintegrated. I found myself thinking, what if she forgets me? What if one day she just calls him daddy? That was the thought that haunted me. I'd go to bed every night and say, does she know how much I love her? Does she know I would give anything to be closer to her? The first confrontation. One Saturday, I arrived at Egil's flat to collect Dana for a visit. I arrived at 10 a.m. exactly as we had agreed. I knocked on the door and hoped to hear Egil's voice announcing to hold on a moment. This time, it wasn't Egil. It was him. Mattis opened the door. He stood there, gray hoodie and sweatpants, as if this was his house, as if he'd been there all his life. I could hear the TV playing cartoons in the background. Dana was giggling my daughter's laughter. I recognized it instantly. It warmed my chest. Egil isn't here, Mattis said casually, resting his head against the doorframe. He did not step aside. He didn't even look stressed. Just smug. Where is she? I whispered, even as my hands were already tucked into fists. Grocery store, he said, scratching his beard like it was another day. She said you could wait. Where is my daughter? I called out, the voice clearer. He looked over his shoulder like it was nothing. She is watching cartoons. Relax, man. Relax? My blood started boiling. I'm not going to relax while some random dude fucks with my kid. I snapped, stepped closer. Mattis' smile faded. He sat straighter and measured me. Look, I don't want to fight, he said, his hands arched a little like he was some kind of peacemaker. She is fine. She is happy. It's enough, eh? I shook my head slowly. It's just that she knows her father. He laughed as if he had heard it all before. She knows, man. Trust me, she knows. He stared down at me, and my heart was racing. I felt every muscle in my body stiffen like a spring to release. It would have been all too simple to just give up on him there, to drop one punch and silence him. But then I remembered Dana. I pictured her little face around the corner, eyes open, watching her father fight. That image stopped me. Always tell Egil I'll be back at noon, I said, turning away before I took a step I would regret. And get her to pick up her phone next time. I turned off, but my hands were still trembling while holding the steering wheel. My jaw was so locked that I worried my teeth were going to break. That day I said to myself, here it goes. No more asking permission. No more we will see. I am her father, and they are not going to chase me out of her. A week later, I saw a lawyer. It was Paulius, a steel-hard man with a staring gaze. He listened in silence as I told him everything. The cheating, the birth, the way that Mattis had crept into my daughter's life as I remained outside. After I had finished, he slumped in his chair and retracted his hands. You have a lot to say, he said emphatically. But let me tell you something, Lukas. It's going to be a struggle. Are you ready for that? I nodded without second thought. I am ready, I said. The ensuing months were a roller coaster of hearings, filings, and mediation sessions. I needed to prove that I was a healthy father, that I had a secure job, no criminal records, a house where my son could grow up. The whole process felt humiliating. Let's say you are a dad who already loves your child 100%, but is also required to demonstrate he is deserving of being with her. Egil fought me hard and hard. She said I had anger issues, that I was untrustworthy and unreliable. I was standing in court and hearing her tell me I was some villain. I wanted to scream. I was here for you 11 years. I built our home. I attended all the appointments. But sentiment doesn't matter to the court. It only cares about evidence. Paulius cautioned me not to worry. The judge is watching, he declared. You cannot react. So I sat, grimacing, while Egil's lawyer decried me as some foolish, careless chap. Until then it was my turn. I told my story. I told them about how I would paint Dana's room from dawn to dusk. I reminded them how I did overtime, so we could afford a better crib. I explained to them how Egil went missing, and I doubted I would ever see my daughter again. The judge listened. I could feel it in her eyes. She was listening. After months of fighting, the court sided with me. I was granted joint custody. I visited my daughter 3 weekends a month, and every Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was more than ever. That first weekend that I was able to take Dana home overnight, I spent the night on the couch holding her. Her little head was bouncing on my chest, and I could hear her taking deep breaths. Never had my home been warmer or quieter. I smothered the crown of her head and said, "You're home, baby. You are finally home." But it was not perfect. Mattis was still out there, sulking in the shadows. He was still alive when Egil was alive. I knew it. I recognized it in the photos Egil posted online. Every single one at parks, playgrounds, birthday parties. I felt it every time Dana returned to my apartment saying, "Mattis tells me to do it like this," or "Mattis told me to do that." I'd smile and say, Papa will show you another way. But deep down it felt like I lost a battle I had won. So one night, Dana looked at me with big, wonder eyes and said, "Papa, why don't I always live here?" And it was that question that broke my heart more than anything Egil or Mattis had ever asked. I looked at her, trying to decide what to say. Because sometimes grown-ups get it wrong. I grinned. "But I'll tell you this, Dana. I will always be here. No matter what. Even when I am at Mama's," she blurted. "Since you're over at Mama's," I said, pulling her hair from her face. "I am with you wherever you are." She nodded, content with that response. And then something clicked. Mattis could never replace me. Even though he had snapped family pictures. Regardless of how many pumpkin patches they went to. I was her father. I always would be.